In this experiment, I wanted to test two things. The first was I wanted to recreate many effects from my favourite movies, such as the lightsaber effect and deflection from Star Wars, a Kamehameha wave from Dragon Ball Z, and Iron Man's repulsors and eyes, as well as a blast coming from his gloves. The other thing I wanted to test was whether it was possible to make footage that was taken at night look as if it was taken at day, and footage that was taken at day look as if it was shot at night. Originally in the Star Wars movies, they used a pole with reflective tape and shined lights on it to create the effect of the lightsaber. However, the blade that they used was very weak and it broke during the fight scenes on set. It also caused many other problems. Later on in the movies, as technology got better, they asked Korean animator Nelson Shin if he could animate the lightsaber, which he did using rotoscoping. When researching how to create my lightsaber effect, I found a very useful video tutorial by Creatix Visuals. I used many of their steps when creating my own lightsaber effect. I started making my lightsaber effect by creating a solid layer and masking around it, tracing the blade of the lightsaber. I went through frame by frame, moving the position of the mask to make sure it completely followed the blade of where I wanted the lightsaber to be. Due to the light colour of the blade and the speed at which it was moving, it made it very difficult to see where the lightsaber was when adjusting. If I was to reshoot this scene, I would make sure I had a blade that the colour of it was drastically different from the background I was working off of. The next thing I did was pre-compose the solid layer, and then I added a Gaussian blur and duplicated the layer 5 times. The values I used for the Gaussian blurs were different on every single layer. The first was 1, the second was 10, then it was 25, 50, 100 and 250. This created a shimmering effect on the lightsaber as well as a glow that would extend out and getting fainter towards the edges. I then added an adjustment layer and used a plugin called Color Vibrance from Video Copilot. This allowed me to bring some colour to the glow. One thing I would note is to keep one of the solid layers above the adjustment layer to create a white inner glow of the blade. This is to create that hot glow that lightsabers have, and when studying the footage from lightsabers, the middle blade is always white and the colour is on the outside of the blade. I then added a glow to the adjustment layer, as well as adding hue/saturation, using which I was able to change the colour of the lightsaber to whatever I wanted. For the glow effect for Iron Man's eyes and hands, I used the same effect as I did for the lightsabers, only lower values on the Gaussian blur. This was because if I had the values too high, it would overpower the rest of the hands and it just looked like the mask was made too big to fit on the hands. For Iron Man's repulsor blasts, I used similar effects to the lightsaber. However, because I didn't have an object to track for the mask, instead I used the ellipse tool to create a base shape and then adjusted that shape until it fits how I wanted the blast to look. Also, instead of using a Gaussian blur, I used a fastbox blur to make the blurriness look more square rather than rounded. To make the blast move fast, I had all their movements last no more than 3 to 4 keyframes. For the lightsaber deflections, I created a bright white mask to place over the hit, or where the hit would take place. I added a glow as well as colour vibrance and a Gaussian blur to this effect. Behind this layer, I added sparks as well as a shockwave smoke effect, which for the smoke effect I used colour vibrance to give it a fiery look. To create the sound effect of the hit on the mask, I layered the sound of the beam with an electronic hit sound on top of a metal tin being banged. To make the hit look more realistic and more impactful, I added in sparks as well as a recoloured shockwave smoke effect to give the hit a stronger, more explosive look. For the hit, I turned on the opacity of the eyes and hands for the Iron Man compositions to make it look as if the armour is broken and is powering down. For the final beam, I used multiple stock footage files that I found online from a variety of sites. I then layered them over each other and used hue and saturation and colour vibrance to help blend them together. To create a beam and laser like effect, I also added a glow. Now I move on to the second part of my experiment, where I began to test whether or not I can make day footage look as if it was shot at night.
I challenge you to a duel. I challenge you to a duel.
So to do this, I used the lumetri color effect in Premiere Pro. I made the temperature colder and added a lot of purple tint to the scene. I then decreased the exposure, highlights, whites and blacks, but then increased the contrast. In order to make the effect darker, I had to apply the lumetri color effect twice. These settings then could be adjusted to whatever I desired and however dark I wanted the scene to look. Turning the shots from day to night was actually rather easy compared to turning the shots from night to day. There were many more problems that I found, the first being the footage was almost 3 times as grainy, and as soon as you brought the image to light, the graininess of the image became more obvious. However, by increasing the temperature and adding a green tint, I was able to make the scene look a lot lighter and an earlier part of the day. However, I couldn't make it look bright and early day as it caused many problems with the sky, the whites on the wall and the skin tones, making one of them look odd or as if it was out of place during the scene. I honestly see no benefits to ever shooting footage at night and turning it to day, as it causes more problems than it solves. The main benefit of shooting at day and turning it into night is the fact that night shoots can often cause the footage to become grainy when using poorer qualities of camera. However, when you shoot at day and turn it into night in post, you can still retain most, if not all, of the good quality footage you captured during the day, and the quality will not be lost when making the scene look like night. One flaw to shooting at day and turning it into night in post is that the sun is still out, and the sun being a light causes shadows and reflections off of things, which can make the footage, once altered in post, look unnatural